Housing Minister still coming, but let's just kick into a couple of things since we started with you, Colin. Tell me, has when Minister of Finance, excuse me, put out her circular about needs over race, that cabinet circular, did that impact the delivery of Māori? Oh, he's the minister now. Do you want me to continue? Or?
Yeah, Karen, I've already started.
Yeah. Okay. So when the minister, when the Minister of Finance put that, needs race circular out, was there an impact on Māori housing, Tama?
No, not an impact on Māori housing or the delivery that's been undertaken under the Māori housing budget. Certainly, I've had the great opportunity to go and visit a number of organisations and entities that have been delivering, Māori entities like Tuatu Tairāwhiti and others, Ngāti Toa out at Te Ahuru Mowai and Porirua, and most recently Ngāti Whakaue up in Ōwhata, up by the Rotorua Airport, who are doing a great job delivering on housing. Right,
so I need to just know about Māori housing, since we've touched on it, and I'm sure the Minister will come to, obviously, the Minister shortly, but what work has been done over the last year in partnership with TPK regarding Māori housing and in particular, Minister, Papa Kainga development?
Yes, well, when we arrived in administration late last year, we found that quite a bit of the budget for this year had already been allocated to Papa Kainga development. It had already essentially been sent out the door. So we've just got to a space where that funding has restarted after the October update, and we're in a position now to look at some of the Papa Kainga opportunities in front of us. Te Puni Kōpiri is working very diligently and professionally to assess what is suitable in that space to partner with, fund, and ultimately deliver Papa Kainga housing. The other thing I've mentioned, just one other thing, is that we do know there's variability across the councils around the Papa Kainga regulatories, for want of a better term. And what we're doing at the moment is undertaking a bit of mahi to see if we can curate a national statement, maybe a national policy statement around Papa Kainga, get a bit more consistency, but also to activate that Māori land that is well suited to Papa Kainga.
It's part and parcel of the granny flat policy.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the way we're going to do the granny flat policy is a national environmental standard, which is a subsidiary bit of national direction under the RMA, which then mandates it through all district plans. So as the Minister says, Associate Minister says, there's some are really liberal, some don't even mention it. And so we're going to have a national environmental standard for both granny flats and also Papa Kainga. Obviously they'll be different, but the concept's similar. And so that'll be part of 2025. I think that'll be a big step forward actually for Papa Kainga.
And we're trying to get a bit of feedback on that from different folks who have been involved.
Both would have agreed with the Papa Kainga and HUD coming together, you would have agreed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was the natural strategy going forward. So what you're saying today is that the commitment in terms of Papa Kainga is still there?
It's continuing at this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, continuing at this time. And not only that, we've furthered the commitment into the regulatory space, not just into the Pūtea space. So trying to liberalise and make consistent Papa Kainga regulatories throughout the country. I think that's a really positive and constructive way to enable iwi and Papua whānau to establish their Papa Kainga.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Minister, you often talk about how proud you are about the fact that people are leaving motels into, quote, warm, dry, safe homes. How many of the homes that people are going into after leaving motels comply with the Healthy Home Standard?
Well, I can't give you the exact number, but what we can say is that we have been advised by officials that around 55% of those that are leaving emergency housing under the Priority 1 kaupapa are going into transitional social housing. And I think it's safe to make an assumption that transitional housing and social housing like Kainga Ora housing or CHIP housing is either meeting the Healthy Home Standard or is almost meeting the Healthy Home Standard, so it's not far to go. So under the Priority 1 space, where you've seen over 780 households leave since April the 1st, we can say with some confidence that 55% are going into a space which is either meeting the standard or about to meet the standard.
And out of the ones that are going into private rentals,
Yes.
have you received any information at all about the quality of the homes that they're going into or the affordability? I ask this because obviously many homeless people who have gone to private rentals may struggle to sustain their tenancy because the private rental market. Are you sure that actually the people who are going to private rentals are going into places that A, either meet the healthy home standards or B, are affordable?
I think that's a really, really important question to ask, but I don't think that we can be 100% confident that all the destinations of people that are leaving emergency housing, the houses, meet the healthy home standard. But there is a standard in place, and the expectation is that all landlords are meeting the standard. And don't forget, some of those folks that are leaving emergency housing and receiving an accommodation supplement may actually be living in a social house as well as a boarder or something like that. So there's quite a bit of variability, and we can't nail down those numbers exactly.
Finally, while I don't think any of us want kids to be growing up in motels, do you not think it's a bit disingenuous though to then make a characterization that the people who are leaving are going to warm, dry, safe homes, when what you're telling me shows that you're not entirely sure about the quality and affordability of the homes that they're into? Sorry,
I think I just got to adjust something there. The ones that are leaving, the households that are leaving emergency housing under priority 1, they have basically all gone to social housing. All have gone to social housing, so the 786. But there's people over and above those that are left private housing, and when you can capture all that have left, some have gone to social and transitional. It's about 55%. About 25%, maybe a little bit more, have gone to private housing, and some we don't know about because, as I've explained in the House before, people are not required to tell us where they're going to. And I think that in the space of those leaving priority 1, we know for sure because it's social housing. A lot of it is new. We've described and discussed that before. But those that are going to private housing or maybe going to a place where we don't know where they've gone to, but we know that they've left emergency housing, we can't be absolutely sure.
Supplementary, Matamino.
Thank you, Minister. Many whānau that are in families that are in emergency housing get there for a reason.
Yes.
It's tough.
Yes.
So it's one thing to shift from one house to another. Do we know enough about environmentally or even plans, wraparound plans that are part of that shift? So when they go into communities which they may or may not know,
Yes.
what is that? What is the environmental circumstances that they, as well as moving into a house, moving into a context, into a community, into an environment?
So whether or not they have wraparound support and whanaunga, I think that we don't have enough granularity for me to give you a robust answer today, but it's certainly something that I think we should probably note down, and maybe it's something that we can pick up within the agencies to do a bit better tracking. What we do know is that in some areas, definitely the case, they've got Kainga Ora type support around there, or chip support, because many go to the chips sector and chip destinations. And we've seen that in a lot of the Māori housing, for example, Tuetu Tairāwhiti up on the East Coast, who are building houses like anything up there. They have a number of people who have gone out of emergency or an emergency situation, not necessarily emergency hotels, but a difficult situation, and they've got a lot of wraparound whānau and related support. Great example up in Tauranga, I met a young girl. She's about 19, 26 years in emergency, had 4 kids. She had 2 aunties from a whānau order provider essentially around her, supporting her for 3 months as she bedded down how to look after a tenancy and how to look after a rental arrangement with Kainga Ora. I thought that was a great example. But can I just note that for the agencies too?
Yeah, and I was going to say, many of the problems come down to the way the system is organised. So to give you just a little simple vignette to take away, 60% of people on the housing register need a 1-bedroom house. Kainga Ora owns 77,000 houses around the country, give or take. 10% of those houses are 1-bedroom. So you do the math, right? So we haven't been commissioning houses of the right size over the last few years, and that's because the way MSD and Kainga Ora interact and talk to each other, MSD won the register, Kainga Ora is obviously the predominant supplier, not only supplier, but the predominant supplier of social housing. We're doing a piece of work at the moment around becoming much more deliberate and particular around what we buy, both from a typology sense and from a place-based sense, because every region's different. Auckland's different to Wellington, different to, Tairāwhiti. And the providers in each area are different as well. Obviously in Tairāwhiti, there's a lot of work going on through Maori housing and different typologies there. But that's different to Christchurch, different to Southland. So we're doing a bit of work in the system as to how we become much more granular about A, the type of house that we purchase, the place and the house, and then B, and this goes to your question, which is the really nitty, tough problem. What's the service provision as well? Because everyone's different, and everyone in social housing has different needs. And frankly, at the moment, it's pretty one size fits all. And we do go through this quite dehumanizing experience of classifying everyone with a number on the register. You're either A20 or B8. A20 is the people in the most severe and urgent need of housing. By the way, they wait the longest for social housing. The people in the most severe need wait the longest. At 1.2 years ago, I don't know what the number is off the top of my head now, but at 1.2 years ago, people who were A20 waited 450 days for social housing in some parts of the country. It's 18 months, a year and a half. It's nuts. If you think about it, it's actually grotesque. But they're basically treated the same as people who are B8, who are the lowest need. It's still a need, but the lowest need. And the services that people need are quite different. So there'll be people on the register who need mental health support, who don't get it, people who need a variety of other social services. So I'm not saying we have the answers, but we're doing quite a bit of thinking, and will do quite a bit of thinking in the next year or so around exactly how we redesign the system to make it much more granular at an individual whānau level.
So I know others have got questions. I just want to make one more comment.
Yeah, sorry.
That's part of the reason why we've established a social outcomes contracting.
Yeah.
To really encourage a group, Wellington City Mission here in Wellington and Emerge up in Hamilton, to really understand what singles and couples without children in those two locations, which have the highest number of singles or couples without children, need, and try a slightly different way to ensure stable housing for those people. And most of those people are people that have stayed there for 1, 2, or even longer years and have very, very high complex needs, are not already on Housing First or rapid rehousing or some other program. And there's between 50 and 100 in each location. So that's one way we're trying to get to the issues that you're concerned with.
New question, Kieran.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Darren. Oh, sorry, member.
So yesterday with Kainga Ora and MHUD, we established that there were a net increase between Kainga Ora and community housing providers of 4,743 homes in the review period. And then we went through the letter of expectations that was sent to Kainga Ora, and then the commitment for 1,500 homes. Them both being over the next 2 years equates to 4,150. So it's less than half if you go up by an annual basis. That's a significant drop. And so if we refer to comments that were made and referred to, say, in the House on the 9th of April, when there was a commitment to build more houses in the previous government, more social houses, that doesn't add up. So my question is, do you still stand by that commitment? If you do, when can we expect those numbers to be more than this? And if you don't, can you commit to that today?
We are building more social houses, and you've got the letter of expectation, so I won't go through it. But it's 2,650 homes to be delivered by KO to June 26, 1,500 from the CHIPS from June 2025. As we canvassed sort of publicly, and I think in the House as well, we've gone through this exercise with Kainga Ora around restoring it to financial sustainability. We have received the turnaround plan from the board. Ministers are just working our way through that, so I don't have anything particularly new to add to that. But they have produced a very comprehensive plan around lowering construction costs and build costs and making it a much more efficient and effective organisation. We didn't put any more money into KO in budget 2024 because we wanted to get the plan and assure ourselves that they were on the right track before we did that. And so that will be subject to future budget decisions. But, as I've said publicly, and I'll just repeat here, KO and the community housing sector have a very important role to play around future social housing. But, the more efficient and effective you can make both CHIPS and KO, the more you can do, and the more houses you can do. We're just working our way through that. So we'll have more to say about that, soon.
So my question was specifically in reference to the commitment made in the 9th of April this year by Minister Pūtake that this government will build more social houses than the previous government.
We are building, well, I mean,
So
I'd have to see that in context, but we are building more social houses. I mean,
that's
KO
what
is
I'm
building,
disputing. I've just gone through the numbers.
KO is building, the KO is building right now. So are the chips, by the way. We want to do more into the future.
You're responding as if I'm claiming that you're not building any houses. I haven't made that claim. I'm referring specifically to a commitment that was made in the House. This government would build more houses than the previous government, and I've just run you through the numbers.
If you want to go,
Another commitment that was made was that you would build 1,000 homes a year in Auckland. If you go through your letter of expectations, both to Kainga Ora and the commitment of 750 community houses a year, it doesn't add up. In the letter of expectations, it indicates that there will be a net loss of houses, KO houses in Auckland in 2 years' time, and that was confirmed yesterday to be 285.
Yeah, it's a net loss in the year to June 2026. But look, I've made this point before. I just make it again, which is there were 3,000 places put in place in budget 2023 for the next 2 years. So if you want to compare it back to this time in 2023 or slightly earlier in 2023, the funding ran out. We've now funded more in comparison to what was left in budget 2023. 3,000 places expired on June 2025. There was no more social housing funding from July 1, 2025. We have plugged that gap. I accept not to the level that you would like it to be, but we're not at June 2025 yet. So,
So the other thing we went through yesterday was that they confirmed that there were 5,000 homes, Kainga Ora homes, that were due for construction that were being reassessed.
Yeah.
374. So just to be really clear, we're talking units here rather than projects. 374 have been confirmed as being cancelled. 169 have been confirmed as being approved to go forward. If you take the number of 5,000, those that have been confirmed either way, and the number that have outlined in the letter of expectation, there's a 550 house gap there. So when can we expect to have confirmation either way? I don't want to be disingenuous and assume they're being cancelled. The numbers suggest that, but we'll wait for confirmation.
Yeah.
When can we expect that?
well, those are operational decisions for the agency. They're working their way through that, and obviously that is dictated by the revised letter of expectation that we have set, and also our clear direction to them to focus on value for money. It is also fair to say that at any one time, they own 78,000 houses around the country and have a large number of developments. So at any one time, there'll be projects that, and this was true under the last government as well, projects that are put on hold or paused. I accept that there's been a lot of that in the last year or so since the independent review. But Kainga Ora owns land that they bought in 2018 for the purpose of housing development, 2018, 2019, 2020 that they bought that has not been developed. No houses have been built on that land, and the reasons for that will vary from there's not the demand in the particular area, or the typology that they wanted to build doesn't make sense anymore, or resource consenting, or the economics of development don't stack up. It's a complex picture. So at any one time, that's going on, and that goes all the way back.
A previous example where 5,000 homes were being reassessed as to whether they'll go ahead. I accept that projects get changed, the details of that get changed. They demolish houses to build houses. That's sort of business as usual. But I can't think of another example where 5,000 projects that were going to go ahead are now being reassessed, some of which have already been confirmed for cancelling.
Not all of those
indicate there'll be another 500.
Not all of those projects were funded to go ahead. They would have been a variety of different. I mean, we can give you KO probably give you the breakdown. We could ask through the follow-up questions, but as I say, at any one time, it's a complex moving picture. It changes from month to month.
Any questions, Simon Court?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bishop, Pūtake, you both referenced the community housing providers.
Yeah.
And I'm interested as to how you might see their role being further mobilised, given that they are also able to provide some additional wraparound services as well as just a roof.
Yeah, look, the community housing sector's got a big role to play, and the modern social housing system started life in sort of 2014-15, which allowed CHIPS to access income-related rent subsidy, and they have really utilised that opportunity. The next step in iterating the model is giving them greater access to cheaper borrowing. That's more in line with the way in which Kainga Ora can borrow via the Crown. KO went through this period where they were borrowing on the private financial markets and their Bloomberg terminals, and eventually the last government pulled that back into borrowing through the DMO, which was the right thing to do. So we're exploring, and I've made public comments about this, we're exploring opportunities for chip sector to borrow at rates closer to government rates. There's a variety of mechanisms to do that. It's quite a complicated picture. It's not quite as easy as people think. So we're just working our way through that. There's some short-term things we've done. Capitalising the operating supplements, one thing. Better contracting is another. So we've committed to doing that, and that'll start to roll out next year. But community housing sector's got a real role to play.
Yeah, I think my observation to the member chair is that there are about 85 chips, about a third, maybe nearly 40% are Māori chips. A number of the chips are actually partnering with iwi organisations and Māori organisations throughout the country, whether or not it's in land or in buildings or in manaakitanga after things are built. I don't think that the government's the one and only solution for all these challenges that chips have. And certainly I saw something recently on the news coverage around the council in Queenstown providing some inclusionary housing pathways for chips to access, and that's probably got less to do with the government and more to do with local government at the local government level. So again, we can engage with chips, partner with chips, but actually it's a broader community set that's also involved in enabling chips like community finance or local governments that can accelerate their own evolution.
Can I just make a broad point as well, which is we often segment social housing off from the rest of the housing system. It's actually just a subset of the broader housing market, right? And if we're serious about tackling our housing challenges, and I'm sure everyone on the committee is, the ultimate way is planning laws and infrastructure funding, okay? Because it all comes down to rent and affordability. And we just have an undersupply of houses across the continuum. So if we get our housing market under control and make housing more affordable across the continuum, that has flow-on effects. The reason why people in emergency housing is because there's a wait list of 20 now it's now 21,000, it's fallen 4,000 by the way, over the last year. Those 21,000 people are classified as in severe and urgent need of housing. They are in that housing situation because they can't afford the private rental market. They can't afford the private rental market because we haven't built enough houses over the last 30 years when we've had the fastest house price growth in the OECD. That is a function of land markets. With 5 million people in a landmass the size of the United Kingdom, and we've made it nearly impossible to build housing in this country. So so our going for housing growth policy will sort out those problems. Not going to happen in the short term because there's not something that's built up in the short term. But in the medium to long term, our policies around land supply and infrastructure funding will help every element of the housing market. And interestingly, some of the, Kainga Ora has problems getting resource consents like anybody else.
I think taming the cost of living and the economic crisis is also contributive to that.
Yeah,
and that sits alongside what Minister Bishop has observed.
Totally.
Supplementary, Willie Jackson.
Can I just follow up on what you were saying, Minister Portaka, just particularly with some of the Māori housing providers? How can they have confidence, given you guys have removed 40 million in terms of the Kainga Oranga kaupapa, accept what you're saying in terms of working with some of these, obviously working with Willie and the up the coast is great, but we've got a number of Māori providers who need some confidence and some support here. So going forward, are we going to see more investment, particularly in the next budget, with regards to Māori housing providers?
Yeah, well, I think that ultimately it's important to house Māori and all New Zealanders, and Māori housing providers are part of that. What I can also observe, and you might have missed the Aotearoa News update last Wednesday, that we provided $80 million worth of funding to 12 providers up and down the country to build nearly 200 homes over the next couple of years. All of those are Māori housing developers and housing providers. Yeah, I'll send you the note. Actually, I might get Monica to do that. So we have been proactive. Again, with Waikato Tainui, we committed $35 million recently to enable significant developments at Hopuhopu to be carried out and delivered. And there'll be other items throughout the country that I haven't mentioned that have been activated, and just look forward to working with credible Māori housing providers and CHIPS to deliver.
Just a supplementary actually on the CHIPS side of it, is housing cooperatives something as part of the broader picture? And I know, the rental or the private market is over 90%, I think we heard yesterday. But, and sort of that small segment that sits outside the private market.
That sort of housing co-ops.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any work underway on that. There's a lot of people out there with quite bright ideas around different housing modes of delivery and that sort of stuff. Willie and Kieran will remember that from their own time. Can't do everything, particularly from a policy point of view. So there's no immediate work underway around that. But, people want to get on and do some housing co-ops, if they can. If there's regulatory barriers to look at, in time, we can look at that. But, the most fundamental thing we can do is just actually RMA reform and land supply. Zone land for housing, and then allow infrastructure to be built to make sure that houses can be built. The evidence is really clear. Cities that have functional land markets and infrastructure that is allowed to be built without barrier after barrier in the way have cheaper and affordable housing. I'll just refer you all to some cities in the United States which have liberalised land markets. They have grossly cheaper rents and cheaper houses as a result. And cities like San Francisco that don't have people sleeping under the Golden Gate Bridge at record levels and rents through the roof because it is impossible to build in San Francisco. And again, there's evidence closer to home in New Zealand. Evidence is now really clear that the 2016 Auckland Unitary Plan allowed Auckland to grow, particularly in the types of housing that we want to see, and rents are now lower in Auckland than they otherwise would be as a result of the Auckland Unitary Plan. And, the National Policy Statement of Urban Development from the last government, which we're strengthening, will have a similar effect. And that's the whole thrust of our housing policies. That is the single most important thing we can do to get on top of our housing challenge.
One of the adjacencies to Minister Bishop's observations and reflections is around the work that Minister Pink is leading in building and construction reform. And again, that's another space that we think can help tame and manage some of the spiralling costs. And certainly the work that he's been doing so far has illustrated that and been very consultative, might I add.
We're also looking at heritage, by the way, just while I'm ranting away.
Oh, didn't know when the MCH hearing.
A new question, Ricardo, will probably have to be one.
Thank you. I'll try and keep some quick fire questions.
No, do one.
Well, do you think Kainga Ora's current asset to debt ratio is unusually high for a Crown agency and in line with Reserve Bank recommendations? And if so, why is there so much political noise around its debt?
I don't know. I'd have to take that away and put that in writing. I'm happy to have a look at it because I don't know I'd have to go in and look at it.
Well, you've made a lot of noise about the state of Kainga Ora.
Yeah, because they're running 700, well, they were, the 2023 internal budget had showed them running a $700 million deficit, which we have to fund, by the way.
Are you aware that the asset to debt ratio is actually quite normal for a Crown agency and it's well within in line, and in fact, way below, for example, what an average home buyer will borrow for one of their homes? But it is not an unusually high asset to debt ratio?
Well, I think
you're the one telling the story, Ricardo. So.
I think that's certainly a balance sheet item. What Mr. Bishop was talking about is something slightly different.
New question, Kieran.
Thank you. Conscious of time,
Yes.
but I do want to respond to some of the things you were saying there. If you go back and look at the comments we've made on various housing announcements, there's been more support than there has been opposition. The longer term objectives around ensuring that the structures are there for houses to be built, that builds on what we were doing. That's continuity. It's all good stuff. Where we have a fundamental issue is around the level of funding provided to community housing and to KO. Has to be both, not one or the other. But of a grave concern at the moment is emergency housing. No one wants to see people, especially children, living in motels. But when the alternative to that is nowhere else, it's obviously the lesser of two evils. If you look through the numbers and you look at the advice that the Cabinet Committee has received and the confirmation from the departments yesterday, the change in the criteria has played a significant role in the reduction of people being able to get into emergency housing. I'm not talking about where they've gone. It's about getting in.
Yeah.
We've got an OIA that shows that the number of declines have increased significantly and the number of applications have reduced significantly, although no one's willing to come out and say the need is reduced. So that suggests the barrier is at the start. And since we're short of time, I'll get straight to the point. Minister Potaka, when you did questions at the Community Housing Aotearoa Conference, you were presented with examples from those on the front line of people that are trying to help that can't get in. I get numerous emails, as do my colleagues, of people in the same situation. One of my colleagues is currently dealing with someone who was let out of hospital, had nowhere to go, was denied emergency housing, and is now back in hospital from complications of sleeping in their car. Whenever we've tried to ask you about this in the House, frankly, it's been dismissed. At least give us an acknowledgement that the change in criteria has played a part in the reduction of the emergency housing numbers.
I think that rough sleeping and tough sleeping is pretty evident throughout the country and has been for years. No matter where you go, if you come to my electorate, Hamilton West, that's the centrepiece for emergency housing throughout the country, and not only those that are in the motels, but those that are sleeping rough on Anglesey or other streets. So I feel uncomfortable to hear about that particular story. But what I can also say in terms of the declines, there has been a slight increase in the number of applications that have been declined, but nearly 50% of those that have been declined have actually been
267%, just for the record.
have also nearly 50% of those that have been declined in the month of October were actually triaged and helped in a different way to get into housing, not into emergency housing. So I think there's some good news stories in how we are making sure that the system operates in a manner to help people get into housing that is not emergency housing. I don't think it's one way. What we do have, as you are aware, is a reference group that we engage with on a regular basis to hear their genuine concerns and evidence about the issues that you've raised and the observations you've raised. And whilst I think it's very clear that there are some concerns, there's a massive housing crisis, what we also want to make sure is that the original purpose of emergency housing is upheld. That is for people with a genuine need for short-term stay as a last resort. There are many people who are seeking emergency housing who have been declined, but actually have been helped to go into housing rather than a motel. And in that respect, I think there are many things in our revised system and the renewed system that are actually working very well.
Thank you. We are well over time, so I'm going to have to thank you, Ministers, for coming here for us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.